She sold herself to him. But when the deal was over, he locked the doors and said, "You're mine forever." Hi, my beautiful family. With a heavy heart, welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Dear Jesus, bless every precious soul reading these words tonight. For those carrying heavy burdens, for hearts broken by life's storms, wrap them in your divine love. Turn their tears into healing streams and their pain into purpose. Light their path through darkness and fill their hearts with peace. Amen. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories. Tonight, as I stood before my mirror in the dimming light, my heart heavy with thoughts, I asked myself a difficult question. If I cannot give my beautiful family the perfect stories they deserve, should I continue? I switched off the lights and sat in darkness, contemplating this truth. Your satisfaction means everything to me. Yes, sometimes my scenes repeat. Sometimes my words falter. And each comment pointing this out becomes a teardrop on my pages. If the day comes when I can no longer touch your hearts with my stories, I will quietly fade away, as if I never existed. Not for sympathy, but because you deserve only the best. To the 98% who shower me with love, you are my strength. And to the remaining 2% who point out my mistakes, I love you too. Your corrections are precious gifts that help me grow. For how can we learn if we never acknowledge our imperfections? Each of you, whether you praise or guide me, is cherished beyond measure. Now, with a heart full of love and determination, let us begin tonight's tale. Chapter 1. The Proposition. The aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the crisp morning air as Regina Berry unlocked the front door of Sweet Dreams Bakery. Her grandmother's antique key ring jingled softly, a daily reminder of the legacy she carried. The brass bell above the door chimed its familiar welcome, and Regina paused for a moment, taking in the pre-dawn stillness of her beloved shop. At 28, Regina possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads without trying. Her deep brown eyes held wisdom beyond her years, and her natural hair was always styled with an elegant simplicity that spoke of confidence. But today, those eyes were shadowed with worry, and her usual graceful movements were weighted with exhaustion. The January rain painted silver streaks down the bakery's front windows, each drop a stark reminder of how quickly time was running out. Regina's fingers traced the worn edges of another late notice as she settled behind the vintage cash register. The antique piece had been her grandmother's pride, much like everything else in this shop. Now, like her dreams, it was in danger of being taken away. Just another month, she whispered to herself, pulling her grandmother's recipe book from its special shelf. The leather-bound volume was cracked with age, its pages yellow and spotted with decades of loving use. Each recipe inside was a story, handwritten in her grandmother's elegant script, a legacy of love passed down through generations of Berry women. Regina began her morning ritual, losing herself in the therapeutic rhythm of baking. Her hands moved with practiced precision, measuring flour, creaming butter, whisking eggs. The kitchen was her sanctuary, where worries about bills and bank notices couldn't touch her. Here, she was just a girl following in her grandmother's footsteps, creating little pieces of joy for her community. By 6 a.m., the display cases were filled with her signature creations, cloud-light croissants that shattered into buttery shards, dark chocolate cookies with perfectly crisp edges and molten centers, and her grandmother's famous sweet potato pies that had loyal customers driving from 3 states away. The scent of success filled the air, but the stack of bills in her office told a different story. The morning rush came and went, a parade of familiar faces and warm greetings. Regina knew each customer by name, knew their children's favorites, their Sunday traditions, their celebrations and sorrows. Mrs. Johnson came in for her daily bran muffin and coffee. Mr. Patel picked up his standing order of chocolate chip cookies for his daughter's class, and young Tommy from the newsstand traded local gossip for day-old pastries. It was during the mid-morning lull that she first saw him. The bell chimed differently somehow when Nathan Smith walked in, as if even it recognized the gravity he carried. The rain had plastered his charcoal suit to his broad shoulders, and droplets clung to his steel-grey hair like tiny diamonds. At 35, he wore success like a second skin, every movement calculated and confident. Regina had seen his face in the business sections of newspapers, on magazine covers, and most recently on the development plans threatening to reshape her entire neighborhood. Nathan Smith, the billion-dollar developer with the Midas touch, known for transforming struggling urban areas into luxury developments, known for never taking no for an answer. "We're actually closing early today," Regina said automatically, though it was barely noon. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, years of customer service training kicking in despite her racing heart. "Ms. Berry." His voice was deep, rich like aged bourbon, and just as dangerous. "I'm not here for pastries." He moved through her shop like he already owned it, taking in the vintage fixtures, the hand-painted signs, the wall of community photos that told the story of 3 generations of Berry bakers. "Then I'm afraid I can't help you, Mr. Smith." Regina straightened her spine, channeling her grandmother's dignity. "Sweet Dreams isn't for sale." A smile played at the corners of his mouth, not quite reaching his eyes. "Everything's for sale, Miss Berry. It's just a matter of finding the right price." He reached into his pocket and withdrew not a checkbook, as she expected, but a single white envelope. "I have a proposition for you." Regina's fingers itched to snatch the envelope, to tear it into tiny pieces and throw them in his perfectly groomed face. But her grandmother had taught her better than that. "I don't make deals with people who destroy communities, Mr. Smith." He laid the envelope on the counter between them, a bridge and a barrier all at once. "I think you'll find this particular deal intriguing. It's not about buying your bakery. It's about saving it." The words hit their mark with surgical precision. Regina's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the envelope, its weight somehow greater than paper should be. Inside was a single sheet, numbers that made her eyes widen despite herself. "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Nathan Smith moved closer, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne mingling with the bakery's sweet air. "Because you intrigue me, Miss Berry. I've watched you for weeks, arriving before dawn, working until night, putting your heart into every creation. You have something rare in this world, genuine passion." "Passion doesn't pay bills," Regina replied bitterly, thinking of the foreclosure notice hidden in her office. "No," he agreed, "but I can." His grey eyes held hers, intense and unreadable. 6 months, Miss Berry. Give me 6 months of your time, and I'll give you everything you need to keep your dream alive." Regina's mind raced. 6 months of her time? The implications slowly dawned, bringing with them a wave of indignation. "Are you proposing what I think you are, Mr. Smith?" "I'm proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement." He gestured around the bakery. "You get to keep this place, expand it even. All I ask in return is the pleasure of your company, dinner dates, social events, getting to know the woman behind these remarkable creations." "This isn't Pretty Woman, Mr. Smith. I'm not for sale any more than my bakery is." His laugh was unexpected, genuine. "I assure you, Miss Berry, my intentions are purely social. No strings, no expectations beyond your time and company. Think of it as a business arrangement with potential for something more genuine." Regina looked around her beloved bakery, at the walls that held her family's history, at the photos of customers who had become family. The morning's rain had eased, and sunlight now streamed through the windows, catching the sugar crystals in the air and turning them to stardust. "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan Smith moved to leave, pausing at the door. The sunlight caught his profile, softening his corporate edges. Because in a world of artificial sweeteners, Miss Berry, you're pure cane sugar. He placed a business card next to the envelope. Take 24 hours to think about it, but remember, sometimes the most important ingredients in life's recipe are the ones we least expect. The bell chimed his exit, leaving Regina alone with an envelope full of possibilities and a decision that would change everything. She picked up her grandmother's recipe book, running her fingers over the worn cover. "What would you do, Grandma?" she whispered to the empty shop. The only answer was the lingering scent of sugar and rain, and the echo of a proposition that tasted of both salvation and surrender. As the afternoon sun painted her bakery in shades of gold, Regina Berry stood at a crossroads. Behind her lay the safety of familiar struggles, ahead the unknown territory of Nathan Smith's world. Both paths held their own kind of risk, their own potential for heartbreak or triumph. The real question wasn't about money or business or even survival. The real question, as she turned the business card over in her hands, was whether she was brave enough to risk her heart in the name of saving her dreams. Chapter 2. Terms and Conditions. The Smith Enterprises tower pierced the morning sky like a silver needle threading through clouds. Regina Berry stood at its base, her reflection fragmenting across the glass facade. She'd spent hours choosing her outfit, a cream silk blouse tucked into high-waisted black pants, paired with her grandmother's vintage pearl earrings. Professional, yet distinctly her own style. 24 hours had passed since Nathan Smith's proposition. 24 hours of tossing and turning, of pulling out calculators and bank statements, of staring at old photos of her grandmother standing proudly in front of Sweet Dreams Bakery. The weight of his business card in her purse felt like an anchor, pulling her toward a decision she never thought she'd consider. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and light, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a metronome counting down to fate. The security guard directed her to a private elevator, one that required a special keycard. "Mr. Smith's office, top floor," he said, with a knowing look that made Regina's cheeks warm. The elevator rose smoothly, each floor bringing her closer to a choice that would reshape her life. She used the mirrored walls to check her appearance one last time, tucking a rebellious curl back into place. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Stand tall, baby girl. Your worth isn't in what you own, but in who you are." The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area where a sleek blonde woman sat behind a desk that could have paid Regina's bakery's rent for a year. "Miss Berry," the receptionist greeted, standing with practiced grace. "Mr. Smith is expecting you." Nathan's office was exactly what Regina expected, yet somehow more intimate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of the city, but it was the details that caught her attention. A vintage record player in one corner, shelves lined with first-edition books, and surprisingly, a small potted herb garden thriving in the morning sun. "The herbs help me think," Nathan's voice came from behind her, making her start. He'd emerged silently from a side door, his presence filling the room like smoke. Today's suit was navy, custom-tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a trim waist. Rosemary for memory, mint for clarity. "My grandmother grew herbs," Regina found herself saying. "She said every good baker needs to understand the full spectrum of flavors, not just the sweet ones." A wise woman. Nathan moved to a seating area by the windows, gesturing for her to join him. A silver tea service waited on the low table between two leather chairs. "I took the liberty of having tea prepared. Earl Grey, if I remember correctly from my visits to your bakery." The fact that he'd noticed her preferred tea during his surveillance of her business was both impressive and unsettling. Regina sat, keeping her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. You've done your homework, Mr. Smith. Nathan, please. He poured the tea with surprising skill, the amber liquid catching the morning light. And yes, I believe in being thorough. Sugar? No, thank you. I prefer to taste things as they are. A smile tugged at his lips. How appropriate. He settled back in his chair, one ankle resting on the opposite knee, the picture of casual power. I assume you've given my proposal some thought. Regina took a sip of tea to steady herself. Perfect temperature, perfect strength, of course it was. I have questions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Why this arrangement? You could date anyone, professional matchmakers, elite social circles. You have access to any woman you might want. Nathan set his cup down, leaning forward slightly. Perhaps that's exactly why I'm not interested in those options. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Regina? The use of her first name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. I'm sure you're about to tell me. I see authenticity. In a world where everything is curated and filtered, you're refreshingly real. Your bakery isn't just a business, it's a legacy of love. You put your soul into every creation, every interaction. That kind of passion is rare and... He paused, his grey eyes intense, incredibly attractive. Regina forced herself to hold his gaze. And what exactly would this arrangement entail? 6 months of exclusive dating, social events, dinners, weekends away when our schedules allow. In return, I'll provide the capital to not only save your bakery, but expand it. New equipment, marketing, whatever you need to make your grandmother's dream grow. And the physical expectations. Nathan's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. None. Despite what you might think, I'm not in the habit of buying affection. Any physical aspect of our relationship would develop naturally, if at all. This is about getting to know each other, Regina. Nothing more, nothing less. And if I develop feelings, or you do, what happens then? Then we deal with it as adults. The contract will include provisions for early termination if either party feels emotionally compromised. Regina almost laughed. A romance with an escape clause. How romantic. I prefer to think of it as pragmatic. Nathan stood, moving to his desk and returning with a leather folder. The full contract is here for your review. Take it to your lawyer if you wish. You'll find everything clearly outlined, including the financial arrangements. Regina opened the folder, her eyes widening at the figures. The amount was more than enough to save her bakery 3 times over. This is generous. I believe in investing in potential. Nathan's voice was closer now. He'd moved to stand by her chair, his presence warm and overwhelming, both in business and in people. She looked up at him, struck by the intensity of his gaze. And what if this experiment fails? What if we hate each other? Then you keep the money, save your bakery, and we part as adults. No harm, no foul. He reached down, his fingers brushing her hand as he turned a page in the contract. But something tells me that won't be the case. The touch sent electricity through her skin, making her breath catch. Regina stood abruptly, needing space to think clearly. She moved to the windows, looking out over the city she loved. Somewhere down there, her little bakery was opening without her, Katie handling the morning rush alone. I need time to read this properly, she said finally. Of course. Nathan moved to stand beside her, their reflections overlapping in the glass. Take the weekend, but Regina... He turned her gently by the shoulder until she faced him. Don't let fear of the unknown stop you from taking a chance on something potentially extraordinary. Their proximity was intoxicating. Regina could see the subtle variations of grey in his eyes, smell the mingled scents of his cologne and fresh herbs. For a moment, she forgot about contracts and arrangements, lost in the pure chemistry crackling between them. I should go, she whispered, stepping back. The bakery. One more thing. Nathan moved to his desk, pressing a button on his phone. Sarah, please bring in the other item. The blonde receptionist appeared moments later with a white bakery box tied with gold ribbon. Nathan took it, presenting it to Regina with a slight bow. A gift, or rather, a challenge. Regina opened the box to find a perfect recreation of her grandmother's sweet potato pie. The lattice top, the precise crimping, even the slight dusting of nutmeg. It was exact. How? I had my chef attempt to recreate it based on taste alone. Took him 17 tries. Nathan's smile was almost boyish. I'd love your professional opinion on how close he came. Despite herself, Regina laughed. You really don't do anything halfway, do you? Not when something matters. His expression grew serious. And you, Regina Berry, matter very much indeed. She left his office carrying a contract that could change her life and a pie that proved just how thoroughly Nathan Smith pursued his goals. The elevator descent gave her time to process the meeting, to analyze every word, every look, every charged moment. By the time she reached the lobby, Regina had more questions than answers. But one thing was certain. Nathan Smith was far more dangerous than she'd initially thought, not because of his wealth or power, but because beneath his corporate exterior beat the heart of a man who could match her passion step for step. The contract in her bag felt heavier than ever, weighted with possibility and peril in equal measure. As she stepped out into the morning sun, Regina realized that while she'd come seeking clarity, she'd left with something far more complicated. The first stirrings of an attraction that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the way Nathan Smith looked at her like she was the most fascinating puzzle he'd ever encountered. The weekend stretched ahead, full of decisions to make and terms to consider. But as Regina hailed a cab, she couldn't help but smile. Whatever happened next, life was about to become very interesting indeed. Chapter 3. The First Date. The contract sat signed on Regina's kitchen table, its crisp pages catching the golden light of sunset. After a weekend of careful consideration, consultations with her lawyer, and countless hours of internal debate, she had finally put pen to paper. Now, 3 days later, she was preparing for their first official date. Her apartment above Sweet Dreams Bakery, filled with the scent of vanilla and lavender from her bath products, mixing with the lingering aroma of the day's baking below. Regina stood before her closet, wrapped in a plush robe, surveying her options with critical eyes. Nathan's text had been specific. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. Car arriving at 7. The message had arrived with a delivery, a small velvet box containing a pair of teardrop pearl earrings that complemented her grandmother's necklace perfectly. The note attached read simply, "To new beginnings." N. She'd almost sent them back, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was the thoughtfulness of matching her grandmother's jewelry, or maybe it was the growing realization that Nathan Smith was far more observant than she'd initially given him credit for. Regina finally settled on a deep burgundy dress that hugged her curves before flowing out gracefully at the knees. The color reminded her of rich red velvet cake, of wine aged to perfection, of promises waiting to be kept. She paired it with black heels that gave her just enough height to feel commanding without sacrificing comfort. As she applied the finishing touches to her makeup, subtle but striking, emphasizing her dark eyes, Regina caught herself smiling at her reflection. Despite the unusual circumstances that had brought them to this point, she couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation in her stomach. The bakery's bell chimed precisely at 7. Regina descended the back stairs, her heels tapping a steady rhythm against the wooden steps. She found Nathan waiting in the kitchen, leaning casually against her workbench as if he belonged there. His charcoal suit was impeccable as always, but he'd paired it with a burgundy tie that matched her dress so perfectly it couldn't be coincidence. "How did you know?" she asked, gesturing to the matching colors. Nathan's smile was warm as his eyes traveled appreciatively over her figure. "I didn't. Great minds, perhaps." He straightened, moving toward her with fluid grace. "You look stunning, Regina. You clean up pretty well yourself." She accepted the hand he offered, noting how his fingers enveloped hers completely. "Are you going to tell me where we're going?" "That depends." He led her through the darkened bakery toward the front door. "How do you feel about surprises?" "That depends on the surprise." Nathan chuckled, the sound rich and genuine. "Fair enough. Let's just say I've planned an evening that I hope will challenge your preconceptions about me." A sleek black car waited outside, its driver holding the door with practiced precision. Nathan helped Regina in before sliding in beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The car glided through the city streets, taking them away from the familiar grid of Regina's neighborhood into areas she rarely visited. When they finally stopped, it was before an unmarked door in what appeared to be an industrial district. "Should I be worried?" Regina asked, only half joking. Nathan's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Do you trust me? We barely know each other. Then let's change that." He led her to the door, which opened at his knock to reveal a small elevator. They stepped in, and Nathan pressed the only button available. The elevator rose smoothly, and when the doors opened, Regina gasped. They were on a rooftop that had been transformed into an intimate garden. String lights twinkled overhead like stars, and potted herbs released their fragrance into the evening air. In the center stood a single table, set for two, with a familiar figure working at a mobile kitchen station nearby. "Is that—" Regina started. "Marcel?" "Yes." Nathan guided her forward. "My chef, who attempted to recreate your grandmother's pie. He's been eager to meet you properly." The French chef looked up from his work, his face lighting with enthusiasm. "Ah, Mademoiselle Berry, your pie has haunted my dreams. 17 attempts and still not perfect." Regina couldn't help but laugh. "18's the charm." "Non, tonight I cook other things, but perhaps you will share your secret someday?" Nathan pulled out her chair, his hand brushing her shoulder as she sat. "I thought we could combine our worlds a bit, Marcel's cuisine with herbs from my garden, served under the stars." The evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Marcel presented course after course of exquisite food, each dish incorporating herbs Regina recognized from Nathan's office garden. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine, ranging from childhood memories to business philosophies to shared loves of music and art. "Why real estate?" Regina asked as they lingered over dessert, a deconstructed tiramisu that even she had to admit was masterful. "With your resources, you could do anything." Nathan swirled the last of his wine, considering. "I believe in transformation. Taking something overlooked or abandoned and revealing its potential." His eyes met hers over the rim of his glass. "Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to see the possibility beneath the surface, and is that what this is?" Regina gestured between them. "Another transformation project?" "No." His answer was immediate and firm. "This is something entirely different." He set down his glass, leaning forward. "Tell me something, Regina. What do you see when you look at me?" The question caught her off guard. Regina studied him in the soft lighting, taking in the sharp lines of his face softened by candlelight, the intensity in his grey eyes, the way his presence seemed to fill any space he occupied. "I see someone who's used to getting what he wants," she began slowly. "Someone who calculates every move like a chess master. But—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I also see someone who grows herbs to help him think, who sends his chef on a quest to perfect a family recipe, who arranged this entire evening to show me he's more than just business deals and bottom lines. Nathan's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. And what does that tell you? That you're either the most calculating man I've ever met, or... Regina took a sip of wine for courage. You're actually trying to let me see the real you. Perhaps both are true. Nathan stood, offering his hand. Music had begun playing softly, a jazz standard that Regina recognized but couldn't name. Dance with me. She placed her hand in his, allowing him to pull her to her feet and into his arms. They moved together beneath the stars, the city spreading out below them like a carpet of lights. Nathan led with the same confidence he showed in everything else, but his touch was gentle, almost reverent. You're full of surprises, Regina murmured as they swayed to the music. I didn't expect you to be such a good dancer. I'm full of unexpected talents. His hand on her waist drew her slightly closer. Something we have in common, I think. Regina looked up at him, suddenly very aware of their proximity. In her heels, they were almost of a height, bringing his lips tantalizingly close to hers. The air between them seemed to crackle with possibility. Nathan's hand moved from her waist to the small of her back, steady and warm. I know this arrangement began as a business deal, he said softly, but I want you to know that my interest in you is very real, Regina. She should have pulled away, should have reminded him of the contract, of the clear boundaries they'd established. Instead, Regina found herself swaying closer, drawn by the heat in his eyes and the promise in his touch. Prove it, she whispered. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like she expected. Not the calculated move of a businessman sealing a deal, but something softer, more questioning. Nathan's lips brushed hers with exquisite gentleness, as if he was asking permission rather than taking what he wanted. Regina responded without thinking, her hands sliding up to his shoulders as she pressed closer. The kiss deepened, became something heated and real that had nothing to do with contracts or arrangements. For a moment, they were just a man and a woman, dancing beneath the stars, discovering each other for the first time. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Regina kept her eyes closed for a moment, trying to memorize the feeling. When she opened them, she found Nathan watching her, with an expression that made her heart skip. Well, she managed, her voice slightly unsteady, that wasn't in the contract. Nathan's laugh was low and warm. Consider it a mutually beneficial amendment. His thumb traced her lower lip, sending shivers down her spine. One I hope we'll revisit often. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of stolen glances and lingering touches. When Nathan finally escorted her home, the night air had grown cool enough to justify him draping his jacket over her shoulders. They stood outside her door, neither quite ready to end the evening. Thank you for tonight, Regina said, shrugging off his jacket to return it. It was unexpected. Nathan caught her hand as she handed over the jacket, bringing it to his lips. The first of many surprises, I hope. His kiss brushed her knuckles, sending warmth racing up her arm. Sweet dreams, Regina. She watched him walk away, his confident stride unchanged despite the late hour. Only when his car had disappeared around the corner did Regina let herself into the bakery, leaning against the closed door with a smile she couldn't quite suppress. Upstairs in her apartment, she found a single red rose on her pillow, definitely not there when she left. The card attached read simply, "The first of many. N." Regina fell asleep with the rose on her nightstand and the memory of Nathan's kiss still tingling on her lips. Her last thought before drifting off was that she might be in far deeper than she'd planned, and surprisingly, she wasn't sure she minded at all. Chapter 4. Sweet Complications. The morning sun streamed through the bakery windows, casting golden patterns across Regina's workbench as she carefully piped delicate roses onto a wedding cake. 2 weeks had passed since her first date with Nathan, and life had taken on a dreamlike quality that both thrilled and terrified her. The promised business improvements were already underway. New industrial ovens gleamed in the corner, a state-of-the-art display case showcased her creations, and a small army of contractors had transformed the bakery's facade overnight. The Sweet Dreams sign now glowed with elegant golden letters visible from blocks away. But it was the smaller changes that kept Regina awake at night. The fresh flowers delivered every morning, each with a handwritten note that made her smile. The way Nathan would appear unannounced during her afternoon lull, armed with coffee and conversation. The lingering kisses that grew more heated with each passing day. "Earth to Regina!" Katie's voice broke through her reverie. Her assistant baker stood with hands on hips, fighting a knowing smile. "That's the 3rd rose you've made in exactly the same spot." Regina blinked, realizing she'd been piping buttercream flowers in a daze. "Sorry, I was just thinking about tall, dark and loaded," Katie teased, reaching for her apron. "Can't blame you. The way he looks at you when he comes in here, like you're the sweetest thing in the bakery." Heat crept up Regina's neck. "It's not like that. It's a business arrangement." "Sure, boss, because all business arrangements involve moonlight dinners and secret rooftop gardens." Katie's eyes sparkled with mischief. "The entire neighborhood's talking about it. Local girl tames the developer devil." Regina's hands stilled on the piping bag. What exactly are they saying? Katie's expression softened. "Mostly good things. You've got more customers than ever since word got out that Nathan Smith is investing in us instead of tearing us down. Though Mrs. Johnson did say something about selling out to the gentrifiers." A knock at the back door saved Regina from responding. The delivery entrance opened to reveal Marcel, Nathan's chef, laden with bags. "Mademoiselle Berry, I come bearing gifts and questions." Regina laughed despite her troubled thoughts. Marcel had become a regular visitor, determined to master her grandmother's recipes. Their culinary exchanges had evolved into a friendship built on shared passion for their craft. "Still chasing the perfect sweet potato pie?" she asked, helping him with his bags. "Non. Today I bring you truffles from Paris. Just arrived." His eyes gleamed with excitement. "And perhaps, if you are willing, we discuss the secret to your chocolate soufflé, the one Monsieur Smith cannot stop praising." The mention of Nathan brought warmth to her cheeks. He'd tried her chocolate soufflé at their 3rd date, a quiet dinner she'd prepared in her apartment above the bakery, the way he'd closed his eyes at the first bite, the sound of pleasure he'd made. Regina pushed the memory aside before it could distract her further. "Trade secrets, Marcel, but I might be persuaded to share for the right price." "Ah, you drive a hard bargain like your man." Marcel began unpacking his bags, revealing an array of exotic ingredients. "Speaking of Monsieur Smith, he asks that you dress for dancing tonight. He has plans." Regina's heart skipped. Their dates had become increasingly elaborate, each one revealing new layers to Nathan's personality. Last week, he'd taken her to a hidden jazz club where they'd danced until dawn. The week before, they'd spent hours in an ancient bookstore, discussing literature and dreams. "Any hints about these plans?" Marcel mimed, zipping his lips. "He would fire me, but—" He winked. "Perhaps pack a overnight bag, non?" The suggestion sent butterflies racing through Regina's stomach. They hadn't spent the night together yet, though their goodnight kisses had grown increasingly passionate. The chemistry between them was undeniable, but something held Regina back. Perhaps the fear that crossing that line would make their arrangement too real, too complicated. The day passed in a blur of baking and anticipation. By closing time, Regina had stress-baked 3 dozen cupcakes and reorganized her supply shelves twice. She was just locking up when a sleek black motorcycle roared to a stop outside. Nathan dismounted with fluid grace, removing his helmet to reveal slightly tousled grey hair. The sight of him in leather riding gear instead of his usual suits made Regina's mouth go dry. He looked dangerous, powerful, and impossibly attractive. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, producing a second helmet. Regina eyed the motorcycle with mixture of excitement and trepidation. "This is definitely not what I expected." "Good." Nathan's smile was wicked as he helped her with the helmet. "I like surprising you. Keeps you from overthinking things." The ride was exhilarating. Regina held tight to Nathan's waist as they wove through city streets, heading toward the coast. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and the sea air carried promises of mystery and romance. They finally stopped at a private beach house perched on the cliffs. Music drifted from the open doors, and lanterns lined the path to the entrance. Inside, Regina gasped. The entire space had been transformed into an intimate ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular ocean views. "What is all this?" she asked, taking in the champagne chilling by the window and the table set for two on the terrace. Nathan pulled her close, his hands settling naturally on her waist. "Dance lessons. You mentioned wanting to learn the tango." As if on cue, a couple emerged from the shadows, professional dancers, Regina realized. For the next hour, they guided Regina and Nathan through the basic steps of the tango. The dance was intimate, passionate, requiring complete trust between partners. "You have to let him lead," the female instructor advised, adjusting Regina's posture. "Feel his intention through his touch. The tango is a conversation between bodies." Regina struggled at first, her natural independence fighting against the dance's requirements. But gradually, she began to understand. It wasn't about submission, but about partnership. Each person playing their part in creating something beautiful. As the lesson progressed, the chemistry between them became almost unbearable. Every touch, every close pass, every moment their eyes met sent electricity coursing through Regina's body. When the instructors finally left, the sexual tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Nathan pulled her close, one hand sliding up her spine. "Dinner is ready whenever you want it," he murmured against her ear. "But first, I'd like to practice what we learned." They danced as the sun set, their movements becoming more fluid, more intimate with each pass. Regina lost herself in the rhythm, in the heat of Nathan's touch, in the way his eyes never left hers. When he finally dipped her low, their faces inches apart, she could no longer resist. The kiss was different from their others, hungry, demanding, full of weeks of built-up desire. Regina wound her fingers in Nathan's hair, pulling him closer as his hands roamed her back. They stumbled backward until she hit the window, the cool glass, a sharp contrast to the heat of his body, pressing against her. "Regina," Nathan groaned against her mouth, "we should stop." "Why?" She nipped at his lower lip, thrilling at his sharp intake of breath. "Because if we don't, dinner will get cold, and Marcel will never forgive me for ruining his soufflé." Regina laughed, the sound slightly breathless. Always the businessman, thinking of consequences. Nathan pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, his expression intense. "Number always thinking of you, of doing this right." His thumb traced her swollen lips. "I don't want this to be just about desire. You're too important for that." The words hit Regina like a physical force. She searched his face, looking for any sign of manipulation or calculation. All she found was raw honesty and something that looked dangerously like falling in love. "Nathan!" She started, not sure what she wanted to say. He silenced her with a gentle kiss. "Let's have dinner. Watch the stars come out. Talk about everything and nothing. His smile was tender. "We have time, Regina, all the time in the world." They ate on the terrace, the ocean providing a soundtrack of gentle waves. The conversation flowed easily, touching on childhood dreams, future hopes, shared passions. Regina found herself telling him about her parents' death, about her grandmother raising her, about the way baking had saved her soul during the darkest times. Nathan listened with complete attention, offering his own stories of growing up with ambitious parents who valued success over happiness. "That's why I started growing herbs," he admitted. "It was the one thing that was just for me. No profit margins, no quarterly reports, just growth and patience and faith." As the night grew cooler, they moved inside to the fireplace. Nathan played soft jazz on an ancient record player while Regina curled against him on the plush sofa. The warmth of the fire, the rhythm of his heartbeat under her ear, the gentle stroke of his fingers through her hair, everything combined to create a moment of perfect contentment. "Stay," Nathan whispered into her hair. "Not for anything but this. Just stay." Regina lifted her head to look at him. In the firelight, his eyes were dark with emotion. She thought about the contract in her desk drawer, about the complications and consequences. Then she thought about the way he looked at her like she was precious, the way he challenged and supported her in equal measure, the way being with him felt like coming home. "Yes," she said simply, and watched joy bloom across his face. They fell asleep tangled together on the sofa, still fully clothed, the fire burning low. Regina's last thought before drifting off was that she was in dangerous territory, because this no longer felt like an arrangement. It felt like falling in love, and that wasn't part of the deal at all. Chapter 5. Hidden Truths. Dawn painted the beach house windows in shades of rose and gold as Regina stirred awake. She found herself still on the sofa, wrapped in a cashmere throw that hadn't been there when she'd fallen asleep. Nathan's warmth was missing, but the smell of fresh coffee drew her toward the kitchen. She found him on the terrace, already dressed in fresh clothes that must have been stashed here in advance. He stood at the railing, phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying traces of tension she'd never heard before. "I don't care what the board thinks, Sarah. The development plan has changed." He paused, running a hand through his silver hair. "No, I'm not letting this one go. Find another solution." Regina hesitated in the doorway, suddenly conscious of her rumpled dress and messy hair. Before she could retreat, Nathan turned, his face softening at the sight of her. "We'll discuss this later," he said into the phone, ending the call. "Good morning, beautiful." "Everything okay?" Regina asked, accepting both the coffee cup he offered and the gentle kiss he pressed to her temple. "Just business." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." Something in his tone set off warning bells in Regina's mind. But before she could press further, Nathan's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it with a frown. "I hate to cut our morning short, but there's an emergency meeting I can't avoid." He pulled her close, nuzzling her neck. "Let me have my driver take you home." Regina stepped back slightly. "I can call a car. You clearly have your hands full." "Regina." Nathan caught her hand, his expression earnest. "Last night was perfect. Don't let my morning business spoil it." She squeezed his hand, forcing a smile. "It's fine, really. I need to open the bakery anyway." The ride home gave Regina time to think. Something about Nathan's phone conversation nagged at her. Development plans, the board. She'd been so caught up in their romance, she'd almost forgotten how they'd met, with him planning to buy out her entire block. The bakery was already bustling when she arrived. Katie had opened up, handling the morning rush with practiced efficiency. But as Regina slipped in through the back door, she noticed an unusual tension in the air. "Boss, you might want to see this," Katie said, handing over a tablet open to a local news site. The headline made Regina's blood run cold. Smith Enterprises development plans leaked, historic district set for major overhaul. The article detailed plans for a massive luxury development, plans that included the entire street where Sweet Dreams Bakery stood. Plans dated just 3 weeks ago, after their arrangement began. Regina's hands trembled as she read. According to the leaked documents, Nathan's company had been quietly buying properties in the area for months. The only holdout was her bakery, labeled in the plans as pending acquisition. "Regina?" Katie's voice was gentle. "You okay?" The bell above the door chimed before she could answer. Marcel burst in, his usually cheerful face drawn with concern. "Mademoiselle Berry, I came as soon as I saw—" He stopped short, taking in her expression. "Ah, you have seen it." "Did you know?" Regina asked quietly. Marcel shifted uncomfortably. I hear things in the kitchen. But Monsieur Smith, he has changed since meeting you. The plans, they are old. Save it." Regina straightened her spine, channeling her grandmother's strength. "Katie, can you handle things here? I need to change and make a call." Upstairs in her apartment, Regina shed her evening dress like armor being stripped away. Under the hot spray of her shower, she tried to sort through her tumbling emotions. Had everything, the dates, the kisses, the growing feelings between them, been just another business strategy? Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Trust your heart, baby girl, but keep your eyes open." Sometimes, the sweetest frosting hides the stalest cake. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and black pencil skirt, Regina made the call she'd been dreading. Within an hour, she was stepping into the elevator at Smith Enterprises. Nathan's receptionist tried to stop her. "Mr. Smith is in a board meeting." "Perfect!" Regina strode past her, pushing open the boardroom doors with determined grace. 15 heads turned to stare as she entered. Nathan stood at the head of the table, his presentation frozen on the screen behind him. His face registered shock, then concern, then something like resignation. "Regina, when were you going to tell me?" She slapped the printed article onto the table. Or was that not part of the acquisition strategy? One of the board members, a silver-haired woman, leaned forward with interest. "Mr. Smith, is this the baker you mentioned?" "This meeting is adjourned," Nathan said firmly. "We'll reconvene tomorrow." Regina waited as the board members filed out, some openly curious, others carefully avoiding her gaze. When the last one left, Nathan closed the door and turned to face her. "It's not what you think." "Really?" Regina's laugh held no humor. "Because I think you've been playing me for a fool. All those talks about authenticity and taking chances, was that just market research?" "No." Nathan moved toward her, stopping when she held up a hand. "The plans are real, but they're from before us, before I knew you. And now everything's different." He ran a hand through his hair, his corporate polish cracking. "I've been trying to convince the board to modify the development, to preserve the historical buildings, create a cultural district centered around businesses like yours. And when were you going to tell me about any of this?" "I was waiting for the right time." "The right time?" Regina's voice rose. "Like maybe after I fell in love with you? After I was too emotionally invested to think clearly?" The words hung between them, the first time either had mentioned love. Nathan's expression softened, his eyes filling with something that made Regina's heart ache. "Regina, please, let me explain everything." "I think you've explained enough." She moved to the window, looking out over the city she loved. "You know what the worst part is? I actually believed you were different, that what was growing between us was real." "It is real." Nathan's voice was rough with emotion. "Everything I feel for you is real." "How can I believe that?" Regina turned to face him. "Our entire relationship is built on a business deal. one that apparently included plans to demolish my family's legacy. Plans change, people change. He stepped closer, and this time she didn't back away. You've changed me, Regina, in ways I never expected. Prove it. Nathan moved to his computer, typing rapidly. After a moment, he turned the screen toward her. On it was an email to the board, dated the morning after their first kiss. Development Strategy Revision, the subject line read. The body detailed extensive changes to the original plan, including preservation requirements and small business incentives. At the bottom was a note. Sweet Dreams Bakery, to remain untouched, non-negotiable. I've been fighting for this for weeks, Nathan said quietly. The board thinks I'm crazy, throwing away millions in potential profit, but I don't care. I'll buy them out myself if I have to. Regina read the email twice, her hands pressed against the cool glass of the desk. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to be with me for me, not because of what I could do for your business. He moved behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not touching. The contract might have brought us together, but everything since then, every kiss, every conversation, every moment, has been real. Regina closed her eyes, remembering the way he'd held her last night, the tenderness in his touch, the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd asked her to stay. I need time, she said finally, time to think. I understand. Nathan's voice was resigned but gentle. But Regina, I'm not giving up, on the development changes or on us. She gathered her purse, heading for the door. At the last moment she turned back. The board member who recognized me. What exactly did you tell them about me? For the first time that day, Nathan smiled. That you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met, and that I'm pretty sure I'm falling in love with you. The words followed Regina into the elevator, echoing in her mind as she rode down to the lobby. Outside, the city bustled with afternoon energy, unaware of the drama unfolding in its midst. Her phone buzzed with a text from Katie. Huge order just came in. Need you back here, boss? Regina took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. She had a business to run, decisions to make, and a heart to protect. Or perhaps, she thought as she hailed a cab, a heart to trust. Because despite everything, when she closed her eyes, she could still feel Nathan's arms around her, still hear the sincerity in his voice when he'd said he was falling in love. The question was, could love be enough to bridge the gap between their worlds? And more importantly, was she brave enough to find out? Chapter 6. Sweet Surrender. 3 days had passed since Regina had confronted Nathan in his boardroom. 3 days of silence between them, filled only by the daily delivery of a single red rose with no note attached. She'd thrown the first one away, the second had made it to her office before being discarded. The third sat in a slim vase on her kitchen counter, a silent reminder of everything she stood to gain or lose. The bakery hummed with unusual energy that morning. News of the development plans had spread through the neighborhood, but instead of driving customers away, it had rallied them. A Save Sweet Dreams was trending locally, and a line stretched around the block. They're here to support you, Katie said, sliding another tray of cookies into the display case. The whole community's behind you. Regina wiped flour from her hands, surveying the crowd through the kitchen door. Familiar faces mixed with new ones, all united in their desire to preserve a piece of neighborhood history. Her grandmother would have been proud and probably terrified by the volume of orders. We're going to need more help, Regina mused, checking their dwindling supplies. At this rate, the kitchen door swung open, revealing Marcel in his chef whites, followed by 2 other professional bakers. Reinforcements have arrived, he announced, already rolling up his sleeves. Monsieur Smith said you might need assistance. Regina's heart skipped at the mention of Nathan. I didn't ask for help. No, but you need it. Marcel's expression softened. He worries about you, you know. Says you work too hard. Before Regina could respond, Katie burst through the door. Boss? You need to see this. Outside, a news van had pulled up. A reporter stood on the sidewalk, microphone in hand, interviewing customers about the David versus Goliath battle between a beloved local bakery and a corporate developer. Regina watched through the window as her regulars defended her business passionately. Mrs. Johnson, who'd once accused her of selling out, was now declaring sweet dreams the heart and soul of the neighborhood. Mademoiselle Berry? Marcel's voice was gentle. Perhaps it is time to tell them the truth. Which truth? Regina turned to face him. That I signed a contract to date the man trying to buy out the neighborhood. That I'm falling in love with him despite everything. Or that I don't know what to believe anymore. All of it. None of it. He shrugged. But mostly that the development plans have changed. That Monsieur Smith fights for you, for this place, every day. Regina's phone buzzed. Another news outlet requesting comment. She'd been dodging their calls, unsure what to say. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? The kitchen door swung open again, this time revealing Sarah, Nathan's usually unflappable receptionist. Her designer suit looked out of place among the flour-dusted surfaces. Miss Berry, Mr. Smith asked me to deliver this personally. She held out a thick envelope. He said it's time you knew everything. Inside the envelope, Regina found documents detailing the entire history of the development project. Property acquisitions, board meetings, financial projections, and most importantly, the evolution of the plans after she entered Nathan's life. The changes were stark. The original design showed gleaming high-rises and luxury boutiques. The new plans preserved the historical architecture, incorporated green spaces, and centered around a cultural district celebrating local businesses. Sweet dreams. Bakery wasn't just preserved, it was featured as an anchor point for the entire development. Attached was a personal letter in Nathan's bold handwriting. Regina, you asked me to prove that my feelings are real, that I've changed. The truth is you changed me long before we met. I watched you for weeks before making that first offer. Saw how you treated every customer like family, how you kept your grandmother's traditions alive while building something uniquely yours. You made me question everything I thought I knew about success and legacy. The original development plans are enclosed, along with my resignation letter to the board if they don't accept the revisions. Some things matter more than profit margins. I miss you. The herbs in my office are wilting without your touch. Marcel's attempts at your recipes lack their essential ingredient, your love. My world feels colorless without your smile. Come to the rooftop garden tonight at 8. Let me show you the future I see for us, all of us, the whole community. No contracts, no conditions, just truth. Always yours, Nathan. Regina's hands trembled as she read the letter twice more. Through the kitchen window she could see the news van leaving, trailing a story that was already out of date. What are you thinking? Katie asked softly. I'm thinking... Regina squared her shoulders. I'm thinking we need to bake something special for tonight. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Marcel and his team proved invaluable, handling the regular orders while Regina focused on a special project, a cake that told their story in sugar and spice. At 7:45, she stood in her apartment, studying her reflection. She'd chosen a dress the color of ripe blackberries, elegant but comfortable. Her grandmother's pearls graced her neck, and Nathan's roses had contributed a single bloom for her hair. The rooftop garden was transformed when she arrived. Hundreds of tiny lights twinkled overhead, and the herb beds had been expanded, new plantings filling the air with fragrance. Nathan stood at the railing, his back to her, looking out over the city. He turned at the sound of her heels, and Regina's heart stuttered. He looked tired, his usual corporate polish softened by what appeared to be several sleepless nights. But his eyes lit up when he saw her, hope and fear warring in their depths. "You came." His voice was rough with emotion. "I brought cake." Regina set the box on a nearby table. "I thought we could start fresh. New recipe, new story." Nathan watched as she lifted the lid, revealing an intricate creation. The cake was decorated to look like their city block, complete with a tiny Sweet Dreams bakery. But around it, sugar flowers bloomed and miniature trees grew, showing how development and tradition could coexist. "It's beautiful." Nathan's fingers hovered over the details. "Like your vision of the future." "Our vision," Regina corrected softly. "If you meant what you wrote in that letter." "Every word." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'll prove it however you need me to. Buy out the board, step down as CEO, whatever it takes." Regina placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. "I don't need you to give up everything. I just need you to be honest with me. Always. I swear it." Nathan covered her hand with his. "No more secrets, no more contracts, just us finding our way together." She studied his face in the soft lighting, seeing past the powerful developer to the man who grew herbs to help him think, who sent his chef on quests for perfect recipes, who looked at her like she was the answer to questions he'd never thought to ask. "I have conditions," she said firmly. "Anything. The development preserves not just my bakery, but the character of the neighborhood. Affordable housing included. Support for other local businesses." Nathan smiled. "Already in the new plans. What else?" "Marcel gets full access to my kitchen for recipe experiments." "He'll be thrilled." "And," Regina stepped closer, eliminating the last space between them, "and you kiss me right now, before I change my mind about forgiving you." Nathan's laugh was swallowed by her lips as she pulled him down to her. The kiss tasted of hope and promise, of endings and beginnings. His arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly as he deepened the kiss with a hunger that matched her own. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Regina rested her forehead against his chest. "I'm still mad at you," she murmured. "I know." Nathan pressed a kiss to her hair. "Let me spend the rest of our lives making it up to you." The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Regina lifted her head to meet his gaze, seeing her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "Was that a proposal, Mr. Smith?" "Not yet." He smiled, stroking her cheek. "But consider it advance notice. I'm playing for keeps this time, Regina Berry." Below them, the city sparkled like scattered stars. In the distance, Regina could see her bakery's sign glowing warmly. The future stretched out before them, not a corporate takeover, but a true merger of hearts and dreams. "Good," she whispered, pulling him down for another kiss. "Because so am I." Later, as they shared her cake and talked about their vision for the neighborhood, Regina realized something important. Sometimes the sweetest recipes were the ones you never planned, the ones that came together perfectly despite, or perhaps because of, their unexpected ingredients. Like love in the midst of business deals, like trust rebuilt after betrayal, like a developer and a baker creating something beautiful together. Chapter 7. Sweet Temptations. The summer heat wave hit the city like a blanket of honey. Thick, sweet, and impossible to ignore. Inside Sweet Dreams Bakery, Regina had adapted by creating a new line of chilled desserts that had customers lining up around the block. Her lavender honey ice cream sandwiches and frozen chocolate-covered cheesecake bites had even caught the attention of several food magazines. But today's special project required a different kind of precision. Regina stood in her kitchen after hours, carefully tempering chocolate for what would become the centerpiece of tomorrow's surprise. Nathan's birthday was approaching, and she'd been planning this for weeks. "You're sure he doesn't suspect anything?" she asked Katie, who was helping pipe delicate decorations onto tiny petit fours. "Please," Katie snorted, her steady hands creating perfect sugar roses. "The man's been so busy with the community development meetings, he barely knows what day it is, though he still manages to send you flowers every morning." Regina smiled, thinking of the fresh peonies that had arrived that morning, accompanied by a note that simply read, "Missing you. Meeting runs late tonight. Save me a taste of whatever magic you're creating. N." The past month had been a whirlwind of activity. After their rooftop reconciliation, Nathan had thrown himself into revising the development plans with input from the community. He'd set up a series of town halls where residents could voice their concerns and suggestions. Sweet Dreams had become an unofficial headquarters for these meetings, with Regina providing coffee and pastries while neighbors discussed the future of their district. The bell above the shop door chimed, making both women jump. "We're closed," Katie called out. "Even for me?" Marcel's accented voice carried through to the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway carrying several mysterious bags. "I come bearing gifts from Paris. And news." Regina wiped her hands on her apron. "News about Nathan's surprise party? Oui, and other things." Marcel began unpacking his bags, revealing exotic spices and rare chocolates. "The rooftop garden is prepared just as you asked. Lights, flowers, everything perfect, but—" He hesitated. "But what?" "The board, they are being difficult. They fight Monsieur Smith's new plans, say he is too emotionally invested." Marcel's expression was troubled. "He argues with them even now." Regina's hands stilled on the chocolate. She knew Nathan had been working long hours, fighting to preserve the neighborhood's character while still making the development profitable. But he'd shielded her from most of the corporate politics, wanting to keep their personal life separate from business. "How bad is it?" she asked quietly. Marcel shrugged. "He says not to worry, but I hear things in the kitchen. Some board members, they talk about removing him as CEO. The thought sent a chill through Regina, despite the kitchen's warmth. Nathan had built Smith Enterprises from the ground up. It was his legacy, his life's work. If he lost it because of her— "Don't," Katie said firmly, reading Regina's expression. "Don't you dare blame yourself. That man would give up everything for you, and it would be worth it." "But I don't want him to give up anything," Regina protested. "I want ... "You want what?" a familiar voice asked from the doorway. They all turned to find Nathan leaning against the frame, his tie loosened and jacket missing. He looked exhausted, but his eyes lit up at the sight of Regina, the way they always did. "Nathan!" Regina quickly moved to block his view of the birthday preparations. "You're supposed to be in meetings." "Ended early." He pushed off the doorframe and crossed to her, dropping a kiss on her flower-dusted cheek. "Couldn't concentrate knowing you were here, creating something amazing without me." Marcel and Katie exchanged knowing looks before making themselves scarce. As the kitchen door swung shut behind them, Nathan pulled Regina closer, inhaling the scent of chocolate and vanilla that always clung to her skin. "Rough day?" she asked, running her fingers through his slightly disheveled hair. "Better now." His hands settled on her hips, thumbs tracing idle patterns. "Though I did have to stop myself from throwing my phone out the window during the board call." Regina pulled back slightly to study his face. "Marcel told me things are getting complicated." "Marcel talks too much." Nathan sighed, pressing his forehead to hers. "It's nothing I can't handle. The board just needs time to see that this new direction is better for everyone. And if they don't, then they can find themselves a new CEO." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "I meant what I said, Regina. Some things matter more than profit margins." Regina reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight stubble that betrayed how long he'd been working. "I love you," she said softly. It wasn't the first time she'd said it, but it still felt new and precious every time. Nathan's eyes darkened at the words. He backed her up against the workbench, caging her between his arms. "Say it again. I love you." Regina smiled up at him, letting all her feelings show in her eyes. "Even when you're being stubborn and overprotective and—" He cut her off with a kiss that tasted of coffee and desire. Regina melted into him, forgetting about birthday surprises and board meetings and everything but the feel of his mouth on hers. Her hands fisted in his shirt as his tongue traced the seam of her lips, seeking entrance. The kiss deepened, grew heated. Nathan lifted her onto the workbench, stepping between her thighs as his lips traced a burning path down her neck. Regina's head fell back, a soft moan escaping as he found that sensitive spot below her ear. "We can't," she gasped, even as her legs wrapped around his waist. "Health code violations." Nathan chuckled against her skin. "I own the building. I'll pay the fines." Nathan ... But her protest turned into another moan as his hands slid under her shirt, tracing patterns on her bare skin. A crash from the front of the shop made them spring apart. They found Katie looking sheepish amid a scatter of baking pans. "Sorry," she called through the window. "Just reminding you that we still have prep work to do for tomorrow's special order." Nathan raised an eyebrow at Regina. "Special order? Nothing for you to worry about." She straightened her clothes, trying to calm her racing heart. "Don't you have more meetings to prepare for?" "Actually," he pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I have something for you first." Regina opened it to find 2 first-class tickets to Paris, dated for the following month. "What is this?" "Marcel mentioned you've always wanted to visit the patisseries there. I thought—" Nathan suddenly looked uncertain. "I thought we could make it a working vacation. You could study with some master bakers, get inspiration for the bakery's expansion, and maybe—" He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "We could make some memories of our own." Regina stared at the tickets, emotion tightening her throat. It was such a perfectly Nathan gesture, combining her professional dreams with their personal relationship. "The board won't approve of you taking time off right now," she said softly. "The board doesn't own my heart." Nathan tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. "You do. Say yes." How could she resist him when he looked at her like that? When he consistently proved that she was his priority, his future, his everything? "Yes," she whispered, and was rewarded with a smile that could outshine the sun. "Good." He kissed her again, softly this time. "Now, I'll leave you to your mysterious special order. Dinner tonight?" "Can't." Regina gave him an apologetic smile. "Too much to prepare for tomorrow." "Tomorrow, then." Nathan headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Regina, whatever you're planning for my birthday, I'm sure it will be perfect." He was gone before she could sputter a denial. Katie poked her head back in, grinning. "Busted. Completely." Regina laughed, shaking her head. "That man is too clever for his own good. But you love him anyway." "Yes," Regina said softly, touching her still tingling lips. "I really do." She returned to her chocolate tempering, but her mind was full of Paris streets and shared adventures, and the way Nathan looked at her like she was his favorite recipe for happiness. Tomorrow's party would be spectacular, she knew. But the real celebration was every day they chose each other, every moment they built their dreams together, every time they proved that love was the sweetest deal of all. Chapter 8. Sweet Dreams in Paris. The Parisian morning air carried hints of butter and sugar as Regina stood before the gleaming windows of Pierre Hermé's flagship patisserie. 1 month had passed since Nathan's birthday surprise, a rooftop party that had brought together the entire neighborhood and ended with a dance under the stars. Now, here they were in the City of Light, where every street seemed to tell a story of love and possibility. Ready to meet your hero? Nathan's voice was warm with amusement as he watched her straighten her chef's whites for the 10th time. He'd arranged for her to spend the morning learning from the legendary pastry chef himself, a dream she'd held since first opening Sweet Dreams. "What if my French isn't good enough?" Regina fretted, though she'd been practicing diligently for weeks. "Then you'll speak the universal language of sugar and cream." Nathan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You've got this." The next 4 hours were a blur of technique and inspiration. Pierre Hermé himself proved to be generous with his knowledge, praising Regina's intuitive understanding of flavors. Together, they crafted macarons in combinations she'd never imagined. Black sesame with dark chocolate, fig with bourbon vanilla, lavender with wild honey. "You have the touch," the master pastry chef told her in his accented English, "the understanding that baking is not just about recipes, but about emotion, about love." Regina glowed under the praise, her mind already spinning with ideas for Sweet Dreams, but it was the chef's next words that truly caught her attention. "Your man, he speaks of opening a Paris location, a sister shop to your bakery, non? To bring American soul to French tradition." She almost dropped the piping bag she was holding. What? Ah. Pierre's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps I speak too soon. But why not? Paris could use more dreams, sweet ones especially." Regina's head spun with possibilities. A Paris location. The idea had never occurred to her, seemed too fantastical to even consider. Yet here was one of the world's greatest pastry chefs, suggesting it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When Nathan returned to collect her, she was still in a daze. He took one look at her face and smiled knowingly. "I see Pierre let the cat out of the bag." "A Paris location?" Regina stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, causing a few tourists to swerve around them. "Nathan, that's impossible." "Nothing's impossible." He took her hand, leading her toward the Seine. "Just something to think about. For the future." They walked along the river as the afternoon sun painted the water gold. Regina's mind raced with everything she'd learned, everything she dreamed of creating. Nathan listened intently as she described new flavor combinations and techniques, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her palm. "I love seeing you like this," he said when she finally paused for breath. "So passionate, so alive with possibilities." "It's your fault," she accused playfully. "You're the one who keeps making my dreams come true." Nathan's expression grew serious. "Speaking of dreams." He guided her onto one of the famous Lovelock bridges, stopping at its center. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you." Regina's heart skipped as he reached into his pocket, but instead of a ring box, he pulled out a small key. "What's this?" "The key to our future." Nathan's eyes held hers steadily. "I bought the building next to Sweet Dreams. It's yours, if you want it. Room to expand, to create a proper teaching kitchen, to build something even bigger than we imagined." Regina stared at the key in his palm. "The board approved this?" "The board doesn't know yet." His smile was slightly wicked. "I bought it personally, not through the company. No strings, no corporate oversight, just us, building our dreams together." Tears pricked at Regina's eyes. It was such a perfectly Nathan gesture, practical and romantic all at once. "You really believe in me that much?" "In us." He stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Regina Berry, you've completely upended my life, changed all my plans, rearranged all my priorities, and I couldn't be happier about it." A street musician began playing somewhere nearby, the sweet notes of La Vie en Rose floating on the evening air. Nathan pulled Regina into a slow dance, right there on the bridge, as tourists passed by with indulgent smiles. "I have another confession," he murmured against her hair. "I didn't just bring you to Paris for the pastry lessons." "Oh?" Regina leaned back to look at him, her heart racing at the intensity in his eyes. "I brought you here because—" Nathan took a deep breath. "Because I wanted to do this in the most romantic city in the world." This time, when he reached into his pocket, he did pull out a ring box. Regina's breath caught as he sank to one knee before her, there on the bridge, with the setting sun painting everything in shades of gold and rose. "I had a whole speech prepared," Nathan said, his voice rougher than usual, "about how you've taught me that the sweetest things in life can't be bought or sold. About how you make me want to be better, dream bigger, love deeper. But looking at you now, in this light, with that sparkle in your eyes—" He opened the box, revealing a vintage ring that took Regina's breath away. "All I can say is, I love you. Marry me." The ring was her grandmother's, the one that had been pawned years ago to keep the bakery afloat. Regina had mentioned it once, offhandedly, during one of their late-night conversations. Somehow, Nathan had tracked it down. "How did you—" she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "I have my resources." Nathan's eyes never left hers. "And I'd use every one of them to make you happy. So, what do you say, my sweet dreamer? Ready to build a whole new recipe for forever?" Regina pulled him to his feet, not caring about the tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she breathed against his lips. "Yes to forever. Yes to everything." The kiss they shared was sweet with promise and spiced with passion. Around them, tourists burst into applause, but Regina barely noticed. All she could focus on was the feel of Nathan's arms around her, the weight of her grandmother's ring on her finger, and the taste of their future on her lips. Later, over champagne at a tiny bistro, they began planning their shared future. They expanded Sweet Dreams in New York, a sister location in Paris, cooking classes for underprivileged youth. Their dreams spiraled bigger and brighter with each glass. "You know the board will have opinions about all this," Regina said, playing with her ring in the candlelight. "Let them." Nathan captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I've already started the process of restructuring the company. Smith Enterprises is becoming more of a community development corporation, less about luxury high-rises, more about preserving and enhancing neighborhoods. Because of me, because of us." His smile was tender. "You showed me that true success isn't measured in profit margins. It's measured in lives touched, dreams supported, love shared." Regina leaned across the table to kiss him, tasting champagne and joy on his lips. "When did you become such a romantic?" "When a beautiful baker turned my world upside down with one taste of sweet potato pie." They walked back to their hotel through streets steeped in history and romance. Regina's head spun with more than just champagne, with possibilities, with dreams, with love so deep it felt like flying. In their suite, Nathan pulled her onto the balcony for one more dance under the stars. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance as they swayed together, lost in their own private world. "Happy," Nathan murmured against her temple. Regina pressed closer, breathing in his familiar scent mixed with the magic of Paris nights. "More than I ever dreamed possible." Because that's what this was, she realized. A dream come true, but better than anything she could have imagined. A love story written in sugar and spice, in business deals turned to wedding plans, in two hearts finding their perfect recipe together. As Nathan's lips found hers under the Paris stars, Regina sent up a silent thank you to her grandmother, to fate, to whatever forces had brought them together. Sometimes the sweetest dreams were the ones you never saw coming, the ones that started with a business proposition and ended with a promise of forever. Chapter 9. Sweet Challenges. The news of their engagement spread through New York like wildfire. Regina's simple announcement on Sweet Dream's social media, a photo of her grandmother's ring with the caption, "He made me an offer I couldn't refuse," had gone viral. Local papers picked up the story. The developer who fell in love with the baker, choosing community over profit. But reality wasn't quite as simple as the headlines suggested. Regina stood in her expanded kitchen, surrounded by boxes and construction dust. The renovation of the adjacent building was in full swing, transforming it into a state-of-the-art teaching facility. But today, her focus was on a more immediate challenge. "The board meeting is in an hour," Nathan said from the doorway, looking impeccable in a charcoal suit despite the early hour. "You sure you want to do this?" Regina smoothed her chef's coat, a new design that merged traditional whites with modern elegance. They need to understand what they're investing in, not just the business plan, but the heart behind it. The weeks since their return from Paris had been a whirlwind of activity. Nathan's proposal to transform Smith Enterprises into a community-focused development corporation had met with resistance from several board members. Today's presentation was their chance to prove that profit and purpose could coexist. "Just remember," Nathan pulled her close, careful not to disturb her carefully styled hair, "whatever happens in that boardroom, we're in this together." The drive to Smith Enterprises felt different now. Regina watched the city pass by, remembering that first intimidating visit. How much had changed since then, not just between her and Nathan, but in her own confidence, her vision for the future. Sarah met them in the lobby, tablet in hand. "The board's already assembled and—" She hesitated, glancing at Nathan. "Mr. Harrison arrived early. He's been asking questions." Nathan's jaw tightened. James Harrison was the most vocal opponent of the new direction, a major shareholder who'd been with the company since its early days. His support, or lack thereof, could sway the entire board. "Perfect timing, then," Regina said, squeezing Nathan's hand. From the insulated bag she carried, she produced a carefully packed box. "I brought reinforcements." The boardroom fell silent as they entered. Regina felt the weight of scrutiny from the assembled executives, but kept her spine straight as she set up her presentation. Nathan took his place at the head of the table, every inch the CEO, despite the tension in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "you've all received the proposal for our company's new direction. But before we discuss numbers and projections, I'd like you to hear from the woman who inspired this change and who'll be instrumental in its success." Regina moved to the front, conscious of the contrast between her chef's whites and their business attire. "Good morning. Before I start, I'd like to share something with you." She opened the box, revealing an assortment of elegantly plated pastries. Not her usual fare, but something new, a fusion of classic French techniques learned in Paris with innovative flavors that told the story of her community. "These represent more than just desserts," she explained as the treats were distributed. "Each one combines tradition with innovation, luxury with accessibility, just like our vision for the neighborhood." James Harrison studied his plate with skeptical eyes. "Very pretty, Ms. Berry, but sentiment doesn't pay dividends." "Try the one on the left," Regina suggested calmly. "Black sesame macaron with gold leaf. Currently selling for $12 each at our pop-up in the financial district with a waiting list 2 weeks long." She watched as Harrison took a bite, saw his eyes widen slightly at the perfect balance of flavors, the subtle luxury of the presentation. Regina continued, clicking to her first slide. "It's about creating a culinary incubator, a place where tradition meets innovation, where local talent can learn and grow. Every student will apprentice in our Paris location, bringing international expertise back to our community." For the next hour, Regina laid out their vision. The numbers were impressive: profit projections, community impact assessments, property value analyses. But it was the intangibles that gradually shifted the room's energy. Stories of local businesses flourishing, of neighborhoods retaining their character while embracing growth, of a new model for urban development. "We're not just building buildings," she concluded. "We're nurturing communities. And yes, Mr. Harrison, that does pay dividends, just not only in dollars." The discussion that followed was intense. Questions about risk management, scalability, market analysis. Regina handled each one with a confidence that made Nathan's heart swell with pride. Finally, Harrison leaned forward. "One last question, Ms. Berry. Why should we trust our company's future to a baker?" The slight pause before "baker" held volumes of condescension. Regina felt Nathan tense beside her, but placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Because, Mr. Harrison, a baker understands something crucial about business and life." She met his gaze steadily. "We know that the finest ingredients mean nothing without the right recipe. That timing and temperature, pressure and patience make the difference between success and failure. And most importantly, we know that the true measure of any creation is not just in its appearance, but in its ability to bring people together, to create moments of joy, to build lasting memories." She gestured to the empty plates before them. "You've all just experienced it." For a moment, business and pleasure merged. Luxury became accessible, tradition danced with innovation. That's not just baking, that's the future of urban development. A moment of silence followed her words. Then Harrison did something unexpected. He laughed. Not mockingly, but with genuine appreciation. "Well played, Ms. Berry." He turned to Nathan. "She's as formidable as you claimed. I assume this partnership extends beyond business." Nathan's smile was proud as he took Regina's hand, her grandmother's ring catching the light. "In every way that matters." The vote that followed was unanimous. Smith Enterprises would transition to the new model, with Regina heading the Community Development Division alongside her expanded Sweet Dreams enterprise. Later, in Nathan's office, they celebrated with champagne and the last of Regina's test pastries. "You were amazing," Nathan murmured, pulling her onto his lap. "Watching you handle Harrison, I've never been more in love with you." Regina laughed, running her fingers through his hair. "Even more than when I agreed to marry you. Every day I love you more." His expression grew serious. "You know this won't be easy, right? Merging our worlds, building something new." "The best recipes take time to perfect." Regina kissed him softly. "Good thing we have forever to get it right." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah entered with an urgent expression. "Sorry to intrude, but you both need to see this." She handed over her tablet, open to a breaking news story. The headline made Regina's heart skip. "Sweet Dreams goes global. Local success story sparks international bidding war." "What?" Regina scanned the article. Somehow, word of their Paris expansion had leaked. Major international corporations were expressing interest in franchising the Sweet Dreams brand. "It's starting," Nathan said quietly. "The pressure to grow faster, expand further. Are you ready for this?" Regina looked around his office, remembering that first intimidating meeting. How far they'd come from business arrangements and contracts. Now, every decision was shared, every challenge faced together. "As long as we don't lose sight of what matters." She touched his face gently. "The heart of Sweet Dreams isn't in franchises or profit margins. It's in the love we pour into every creation, whether it's pastries or buildings or dreams." Nathan pulled her closer, breathing in her familiar scent of vanilla and promises. "We'll find the right balance, together." Outside his window, the city sparkled in the afternoon sun. Somewhere down there, their vision was already taking shape, a neighborhood preserved, a community strengthened, a love story still unfolding. Regina thought of her grandmother, of the legacy she'd passed down, not just recipes, but wisdom about life's most important ingredients: courage, passion, and above all, love. As Nathan's lips found hers in a kiss that tasted of champagne and forever, Regina knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them the same way they'd started, one recipe at a time, with hearts full of dreams and love as their secret ingredient. Chapter 10. Sweet Promises. The autumn air carried hints of cinnamon and changing leaves as Regina stood in her grandmother's kitchen. Not the bakery kitchen downstairs, but the small, homey space in her apartment where her most precious memories lived. Today, she was attempting something she hadn't done since her grandmother's passing, recreating the wedding cake that had launched Sweet Dreams Bakery 50 years ago. "You're sure about this?" Katie asked, watching Regina sift flour with practiced precision. "We have dozens of professional bakers who could make your wedding cake. The best in the city are practically begging for the job." Regina smiled, measuring vanilla with the ancient silver spoons her grandmother had always claimed held magic. "This isn't just about having a beautiful cake. It's about honoring where we came from, who we're becoming." The wedding was 3 weeks away, and the media frenzy was reaching fever pitch. The story of the baker and the billionaire had captured public imagination, especially after their community development projects began showing remarkable success. The first batch of students had graduated from their culinary program, launching their own successful ventures. The Paris location of Sweet Dreams was thriving under Marcel's supervision, with plans for expansion into other European cities. But today wasn't about business empires or success stories. Today was about remembering, about connecting past to present, about weaving new dreams from old memories. The sound of footsteps on the back stairs made both women turn. Nathan appeared in the doorway, and Regina's heart did that familiar skip at the sight of him. Even after all this time, he still took her breath away. "I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding," he said, staying in the doorway, "but technically that's not for 3 more weeks. And I missed you." Katie rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "I'll give you 2 a moment. Those spun sugar decorations need checking anyway." She slipped past Nathan with a knowing smile. Regina waited until Katie's footsteps faded before crossing to Nathan. He gathered her into his arms, not caring about the flour that dusted his expensive suit. "Rough day?" she asked, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Board meetings, expansion proposals, the usual corporate battles." He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of vanilla and home. "But none of it matters now." "Want to talk about it?" Nathan pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Actually, I came to show you something." He produced a small, worn notebook from his pocket. "I found this in my mother's things." Regina recognized the type of notebook immediately, a recipe journal, its pages yellow with age and use. "I didn't know your mother baked." "She didn't, usually. But this—" Nathan opened the book carefully, revealing handwritten notes and cooking stains. "This was her attempt to recreate your grandmother's sweet potato pie. She tried for months after tasting it at a charity event, never quite getting it right." Emotion tightened Regina's throat as she took the notebook. The detailed notes, the frustrated cross-outs, the determined adjustments. It was a familiar story. Just like you sending Marcel to figure it out. Like mother, like son. Nathan's smile was tender. "She would have loved you, you know, would have been thrilled to see Sweet Dreams becoming what it is today." Regina traced the faded handwriting, thinking of all the mothers and grandmothers whose dreams had led them to this moment. "We should include her recipes in the new cookbook." The cookbook was their latest project, a collection of stories and recipes from Sweet Dreams' history, including contributions from their culinary students and the community. It was meant to launch alongside their next phase of expansion. Speaking of new projects, Nathan's tone shifted slightly, making Regina look up. There's something else I need to discuss with you. He led her to the small kitchen table, the same one where she'd done her homework while her grandmother baked, where she'd signed the contract that had started their story, where they now planned their shared future. The board made an interesting proposal today. Nathan took her hands in his. They want to create a new division, focusing entirely on culinary arts education and community development, a foundation separate from the corporate structure. Regina's pulse quickened. And they want you to run it, completely independently with full creative control and resources. His eyes held hers steadily. It would mean stepping back from day-to-day bakery operations, but it would also mean the chance to help others achieve their dreams on a global scale. The possibility took Regina's breath away, to give others the opportunities she'd had to preserve and promote culinary traditions while fostering innovation. It was bigger than anything she'd imagined. "What do you think?" she asked softly. "I think you'd be amazing." Nathan squeezed her hands. "But I also think it's entirely your decision. No contracts this time, no conditions. Just you choosing your path." Regina stood, pulling him up with her. She led him to the window that overlooked their changing neighborhood. The street below was vibrant with life, students heading to cooking classes, locals shopping at the artisanal markets that had sprung up, tourists sampling their way through what was becoming known as the city's sweetest district. "When my grandmother started Sweet Dreams," she said thoughtfully, "it wasn't just about baking. It was about creating a place where people could find comfort, community, inspiration." She turned to face Nathan. "Maybe this foundation is the next step in that legacy." "Is that a yes?" Instead of answering, Regina pulled him down for a kiss that tasted of vanilla and possibilities. When they parted, both slightly breathless, she smiled. "It's a let's write this recipe together." The joy that lit Nathan's face made her heart soar. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around the small kitchen as she laughed. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" he murmured against her lips. "Show me again," she whispered back. The kiss that followed was interrupted by a burning smell from downstairs. They broke apart, Regina's eyes widening in alarm. The test cakes! They raced down to the bakery kitchen, finding Katie already removing slightly overdone layers from the oven. "Don't worry," she said, assessing the damage. "We can salvage these for cake pops, but maybe save the makeout sessions for after the wedding cake is done." Regina blushed, but Nathan just laughed. "I should go anyway. Board presentation to prepare." He kissed Regina's cheek. "Dinner tonight?" "Your place. I'm trying out potential wedding menu items. I'll have Marcel stand by with his expert opinion." Nathan headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Regina." "Thank you." "For what?" His smile was soft with love. "For making all my dreams sweeter." After he left, Regina returned to her mixing bowls, her heart full of plans and possibilities. Katie watched her with knowing eyes. "You know," her assistant said thoughtfully, "when you signed that original contract, I thought you were crazy. Dating a developer who wanted to buy out the neighborhood, it sounded like a disaster waiting to happen." Regina smiled as she cracked eggs with perfect precision. "Sometimes the best recipes come from unexpected ingredients. And sometimes," Katie added with a grin, "the sweetest deals are the ones that break all the rules." Outside, the city hummed with life and potential. Inside, surrounded by the scents of vanilla and cinnamon, Regina Berry, soon to be Regina Smith, continued her grandmother's legacy while building her own. The wedding cake would be perfect, she knew. Not because every layer would be flawless, but because it would be made with the most important ingredient of all: love, the sweetest deal of all. Chapter 11, Sweet Surprises. The lights of New York twinkled like sugar crystals against the evening sky as Regina stood in Nathan's penthouse kitchen, surrounded by recipe cards and wedding plans. 1 week until the ceremony, and despite her usual calm under pressure, butterflies danced in her stomach. "You're overthinking again," Nathan's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms wrapping around her waist. "I can hear the gears turning from across the room." Regina leaned back against his chest, taking comfort in his solid presence. "I just want everything to be perfect." "It already is." He turned her to face him, his grey eyes serious. "But I have something that might help with the planning stress." He led her to the living room, where a large envelope waited on the coffee table. Regina recognized the legal firm's logo with curiosity. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside, she found documents that made her heart stop. The deed to her grandmother's building, not just the bakery space, but the entire structure, had been transferred solely into her name. "Nathan," she looked up at him in confusion. "Why?" He sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "Because I want there to never be any question about Sweet Dreams being yours. No corporate ownership, no board oversight. Just you, carrying on your grandmother's legacy exactly as you see fit." Tears pricked at Regina's eyes. "But what about the development plans?" "The foundation will handle the community projects. Sweet Dreams remains independent, your heart, your home, your heritage." He brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Consider it an early wedding present." Regina launched herself into his arms, kissing him with all the love and gratitude she couldn't put into words. Nathan responded with equal passion, pulling her closer until she straddled his lap. "You know," she murmured against his lips, "we're supposed to be finalizing seating arrangements." His hands slid under her sweater, tracing patterns on her bare skin. "I can think of better ways to spend the evening." A knock at the door interrupted them. They broke apart, Regina straightening her clothes as Nathan went to answer. Marcel burst in, his usual exuberance amplified by excitement. "Monsieur, mademoiselle, the most amazing news from Paris." He brandished a tablet, showing them an article from a prestigious French culinary magazine. Sweet Dreams Paris had been named Best New Patisserie, with special mention of their innovative training program. "And that's not all," Marcel continued, practically bouncing. "The food critic, she asks about franchising possibilities. Tokyo, Dubai, London, they all want Sweet Dreams." Regina's head spun with the implications. She'd known their expansion was successful, but this level of international recognition was beyond her wildest dreams. "What do you think?" Nathan asked softly, watching her process the news. Before she could answer, her phone chimed with a message from Katie. "Emergency at the bakery. Need you ASAP." Regina's heart rate spiked. "I have to go. I'll drive you," Nathan said immediately, already reaching for his keys. They found Katie in the bakery kitchen, surrounded by what looked like chaos, but smelled like heaven. Every surface was covered with sample cakes, each one more elaborate than the last. "What's the emergency?" Regina asked, looking around in confusion. Katie's grin was suspicious. "Well, remember how you've been stressing about the perfect wedding cake? The students from your first training program had an idea." From the back room emerged a parade of familiar faces. Graduates of Sweet Dreams culinary program, each carrying their own creation. Each cake represented a chapter of Regina and Nathan's story, interpreted through sugar and spice. There was a miniature replica of the original bakery, complete with tiny sugar flowers. A chocolate masterpiece shaped like the Smith Enterprises building with delicate gold details. a Paris streetscape in pastel fondant, featuring both their locations. Each creation showed not just technical skill, but deep understanding of the journey that had brought them all here. "We couldn't decide who should make your wedding cake," one of the students explained, "so we each made one. A tribute to the woman who gave us our start." Regina moved from cake to cake, touching them as gently as she would her own dreams. Each one represented not just her story with Nathan, but the ripple effect their love had created. New businesses opened, skills shared, communities strengthened. Nathan watched her with soft eyes, seeing the emotion overwhelming her. "I might have known about this," he admitted when she turned to him. "The students approached me last week. This is..." Regina gestured at the spectacular display. "This is everything." "No," Nathan pulled her close. "You're everything. These cakes just show what I've known since that first day. You don't just make desserts, you create possibilities." Their moment was interrupted by another arrival. James Harrison, the once skeptical board member, now one of their strongest supporters. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, not looking sorry at all, "but there's something you both need to see." He led them upstairs to Regina's apartment, where the small kitchen had been transformed. New state-of-the-art equipment gleamed alongside her grandmother's cherished tools. A hand-painted sign declared it the Berry Smith Test Kitchen. "The board's wedding gift," Harrison explained, "a place to develop new recipes, train special students, keep the heart of sweet dreams beating right where it started." Regina touched her grandmother's old mixing bowls, now displayed like treasures, alongside professional equipment that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. "The Foundation's educational programs will expand globally," Harrison continued, "but this space remains sacred, for family, for tradition, for whatever dreams you two cook up next." Nathan's arm tightened around Regina's waist as they took in the perfect blend of old and new, tradition and innovation, just like their love story. "Speaking of next dreams," Nathan said when Harrison left, "we never finished our discussion about the international expansion." Regina turned in his arms, her eyes sparkling with possibilities. "Actually, I have an idea about that." She outlined her vision, a network of Sweet Dreams locations, each one partnering with local culinary traditions. Not franchises, but cultural exchanges, with students moving between locations, learning and sharing and growing. "It's ambitious," Nathan said when she finished. "Complicated, probably expensive." "Having second thoughts about giving me complete control of the bakery," she teased. His laugh was warm against her skin as he pulled her closer. "Never. You've proved that your dreams are worth betting on." He kissed her softly. "Besides, I happen to know an excellent business partner who'd love to help make it happen." "Oh!" Regina wound her arms around his neck. "Anyone I know?" "Well, he's completely in love with this amazing baker. Smart, beautiful, changes everything she touches for the better." Nathan's eyes grew serious. "Marrying her next week if she'll still have him." Regina pretended to consider. "I don't know. I did just get complete control of my business. Maybe I should explore my options." Nathan growled playfully, lifting her onto the counter. "Allow me to make a compelling counteroffer." His kiss tasted of promise and passion, of shared dreams and future adventures. Regina melted into him, thinking how far they'd come from that first business proposition. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Regina touched his face gently. "1 week," she whispered. "1 week until forever." Nathan agreed, resting his forehead against hers. Below them, the bakery hummed with activity as students and staff prepared for tomorrow. Above them, the stars twinkled over a city they were helping reshape, one dream at a time. And right there, in her grandmother's kitchen with the love of her life, Regina knew that some deals weren't meant to be negotiated. They were meant to be lived, loved and tasted to the very last sweet drop. Chapter 12. Sweet Forever. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, autumn sunlight streaming through the windows of Sweet Dreams Bakery. Regina stood in her grandmother's kitchen, now the Berry Smith test kitchen, taking a quiet moment before the whirlwind began. She traced her fingers along the worn countertop where she'd learned to bake, where she'd signed the contract that changed her life, where Nathan had proposed for the second time last night, this time with no contracts, just a simple question, ready to start our forever. "There you are," Katie burst in, already dressed in her maid-of-honor gown. "Everyone's looking for you. The hairstylist is waiting. The photographer wants pre-ceremony shots, and Marcel is having an artistic crisis over the dessert display." Regina smiled, serene despite the chaos. "Tell them I'll be right down. I just needed a moment here." Katie's expression softened. "Your grandmother would be so proud of everything you've built, everything you've become. She'd love Nathan," Regina said softly. "Would have seen right through his business facade to the man who grows herbs to help him think." The kitchen door opened again, revealing Sarah, Nathan's normally unflappable assistant, looking uncharacteristically emotional. "Ms. Berry, there's something you need to see." She led them downstairs to the bakery's front window. Regina gasped. The entire street had been transformed overnight. Fairy lights twinkled in every tree, flowers cascaded from every windowsill, and handmade signs from local businesses offered congratulations to the couple who'd helped save the neighborhood. But it was the people gathering outside that brought tears to Regina's eyes, students from their culinary program wearing their chef whites, families who'd been coming to Sweet Dreams for generations, local business owners whose shops had flourished under the new development plan, all arriving early, hours before the ceremony, to show their support. "Nathan's been planning this for weeks," Sarah explained. "Every business in the district contributed something. The flowers, the lights, the decorations. It's their gift to you both." Regina pressed a hand to her heart, overwhelmed by the love surrounding them. "Where is he? Nathan?" "Breaking tradition by asking for you," came his voice from behind her. "Don't turn around. I know it's bad luck, but I needed to tell you something before everything starts." Regina closed her eyes, feeling his presence warm against her back. "You're not supposed to be here." "Since when have we followed the rules?" His voice was tender with amusement. "Remember our first meeting? You told me you don't make deals with people who destroy communities. And look at us now." "Look at us now," he agreed softly. "Building something bigger than either of us imagined, but that's not why I'm here." He paused, and Regina could picture him running a hand through his silver hair, the way he did when emotions overwhelmed him. "I'm here because I needed to tell you that every morning when I wake up, I thank whatever twist of fate brought you into my life. Every decision, every choice that led us here, they were all worth it just to stand with you today." Tears slipped down Regina's cheeks. "Nathan... Don't cry, sweetheart. Just remember that feeling when you walk down the aisle. Remember that everything, the business, the foundation, all of it, means nothing compared to the love we share." His voice roughened with emotion. "I'll see you soon, my sweet dreamer." She felt his presence withdraw, heard the door close softly behind him. Katie appeared with tissues and a knowing smile. "Come on, boss. Let's make you a bride." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Regina's dress, a creation that merged classic elegance with modern grace, just like her baking. Her grandmother's pearls at her throat, Nathan's first rose tucked into her bouquet. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, all woven into a tapestry of love and tradition. The ceremony would take place in the garden they'd created atop the building where they'd first reconciled. Now it was a flourishing green space that served the community, hosting classes and events. Today it was transformed into a fairy tale setting, with flowers and lights and the city skyline as their witness. As Regina prepared to walk down the aisle, a familiar scent stopped her. Sweet potato pie, her grandmother's recipe. She turned to find Marcel holding a tiny, perfect pie. "For luck," he said, eyes suspiciously bright. "The first thing that brought you together." The ceremony itself was a blend of traditional and unique, just like them. Their vows, written in secret, echoed each other in unexpected ways. "I promise to be your partner in all things," Nathan said, his voice carrying across the hushed garden. "To nurture your dreams as tenderly as you nurture your creations. To remember that love, like the perfect recipe, requires patience, dedication, and the courage to try new things." Regina's voice shook slightly as she responded, "I promise to be your home, your heart, your constant surprise. To remind you that the sweetest things in life can't be bought or sold. To face every challenge and celebrate every joy, knowing that together we create the perfect blend." The reception was a celebration that spilled from the rooftop down into the streets below. Every shop in the district had contributed something: food, music, decorations. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a community celebration, a testament to how love could transform not just two lives, but an entire neighborhood. The wedding cakes, all of them created by their students, were displayed like art pieces telling their story in sugar and spice. But the centerpiece was Regina's recreation of her grandmother's original wedding cake, with one special addition: herbs from Nathan's garden crystallized in sugar, creating a bridge between past and future. As evening fell, Nathan led Regina in their first dance as husband and wife. The song was the same one that had played during their first rooftop date, but this time there was no hesitation, no contracts, no conditions, just two hearts beating in perfect rhythm. "Happy," Nathan murmured against her temple. Regina looked around at their gathered loved ones, at the community they'd built together, at the future stretching bright before them. "More than I ever dreamed possible." Later, as the party continued below, they stole a moment alone in her grandmother's kitchen. Regina had changed into a simpler dress for traveling, but Nathan thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "Ready for our next adventure?" he asked, pulling her close. Their honeymoon would begin in Paris, overseeing the opening of their newest training program, then continue to locations around the world where future sweet dreams would bloom. But that wasn't the adventure that mattered most. "As long as we're together," Regina replied, reaching up to touch his face. "Every day is an adventure." Nathan's kiss tasted of champagne and promises, of shared dreams and future possibilities. When they parted, both slightly breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "for a business arrangement this turned out pretty well." Regina laughed, the sound pure joy. "Best deal I ever made." Outside, the city hummed with life and potential. Inside, in the kitchen where it all began, Nathan and Regina Smith embraced their future, one filled with love, purpose, and dreams sweet enough to share with the world. Because sometimes the most valuable contracts are written not on paper, but on hearts. And sometimes the sweetest deals are the ones that break all the rules to create something perfectly, beautifully real. The end.